you guys have all been in the business for more than a quarter of a century. Let's let that sink in for a moment. What do you know now that you wish you knew 25 years ago, or that you would recommend to somebody who's starting out or has a younger company that they really ought to pay attention to? Because you found out how important it is. What's really important?
Your cost, specifically cost of goods sold, I think is the most important thing, and looking at your gross margin and managing your company to certain gross margin goals. That is what I've found over the last 5 years. And not only at an executive management level, but people that are responsible for those different areas in the cost of goods sold portion of your business, they need to be responsible, and they need to understand how the decisions that they make every day affect that gross margin. So there's very little those people can do about the SG&A. That's all up to the executive team. But they can affect the company's gross margin with every decision they make on a daily basis. And I would really instill that in my staff from the very beginning.
Yeah, in addition to the gross margin question, I think I would love to have handled my early employees better. I've just learned that the most important asset we have is our staff, not just in rhetoric, but actually in real life. How they enjoy their job, how they enjoy their life, and how they treat and just love our clients is a huge deal to us now. Really in the last 2 years. First 23 years, not so great. Last 2 years, it's a big deal, and it's changed the way we work.
You've been in business 25 years. How many employees have been with you that long, or at least 20 years?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah, I feel that.
But I'm really thrilled that our retention the last 2 years is 110%.
Yeah.
We've actually had employees come back from the past to join us again, and that's a sweet thing.
Very
to be a part
impressive.
of.
Yeah, I think obviously when you start out of a garage, you're doing everything you can just to survive. So you don't start out with a strategic plan. You don't have a business plan. You don't have goals. Looking at it now, if I started over, having the goals clearly defined for your team so that they have something to achieve and they know why it's important, that's something I would do differently. I think profit in our industry has turned into a dirty word, and you need to help your team understand why profit is important, not only to us but to them, and so that they can help you achieve that. Because the profit, you owe it to them to run a successful company, to be able to be healthy, and for the long term, that's in their best interest.
In what context is profit a dirty word?
Profit's a dirty word in the sense that, in general, people think that they're there to make the owner wealthy and greed, and those types of scenarios can get people focused on the wrong thing. And if you drive profit, people, especially in the, people that are working in warehouse functions that don't really get the benefit of knowing what the strategic plans are, can look at that and say that I'm working really hard, and they keep working harder, but they don't realize why they're doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of times I find they don't understand it. You'll get a person that will look at a rental rate on a particular piece of equipment, and I'll hear some talk about, well, you could almost buy it for that.
Right.
They have no idea that it's not a finance function, that we're providing a service. Mm-hmm. The cost of that equipment and the cost and our rental rate really have nothing to do with each other as far as I'm concerned. The other place I see it is they'll see $750 labor daily rates for a 10-hour day. Right. They know they're not making that, but they have no idea what their full compensation package is. So I found it important. We just went for 140 employees. We just outlined what their compensation is. So they're not only thinking, I make $65,000 a year. When we put it on paper and you put their personal days, their vacation, their health benefits, all of a sudden that guy making $65,000 a year realizes he makes $95,000 a year. So we found that to be important.
Yeah, you can't blame them. They don't see that because we're not sharing that information with them, and we owe it to them to share it.
We owe it to them to make them understand that. Mm-hmm. You're exactly right.
I think in general, if you review your quarterly finances at whatever level you're comfortable sharing, it helps to articulate why we're driving some of the goal changes that we're driving. It helps them to understand this is why this was a great quarter. It's not necessarily the biggest and best show, or it wasn't necessarily a lot of events. It was really a good, solid, profitable quarter where we managed the details well and we managed the goals well. I think a lot of that comes through finances. I think it's important that we share those.
So what are the challenges that you experience trying to share this kind of information? I mean, you've got warehouse workers who have no financial background at all. How do you make the information relevant to them?
I think you have to make that part of the culture. I think if you just share tidbits of information, it can get delivered the wrong way. It's kind of like the schoolroom chatter where it starts on one end and is a completely different story by the time you let it spread. If you don't constantly help people understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why it's important, some information is worse than no information.
And I think your management team can can establish that and set examples for people. You were mentioning earlier that you find half full bottles of water in your warehouse. If someone's going to can make that clear that that seems like it's not that important. But if they're gonna know that you're gonna take a half bottle of water serious, then you're gonna take the quality control of your equipment serious as well.
We also tried an exercise where I had some capital money. I had about $10,000. It was the very end of the year and I didn't know what to do with it. And I was trying to think through what was a good strategy and literally put it in the middle of the table and asked the staff, how would you spend this? And created a competition around what would you do with this $10,000. And it generated a nice vibe. It made them understand they all wanted to spend the $10,000 differently. And at the end of the day, I just said, do you see how tough it is to make great decisions in a vacuum? We've got to be able to have conversations. And that $10,000 is a lot of money, but it's only $10,000. And it can't do everything. So some of it is trust, some of it is confidence, and some of it is involving their minds in the process.
So if you were starting a business today, or really for the information of anybody who is starting a business today, what do you see as the biggest threats to the industry? Or to the way that you are comfortable doing business? Let me put it that way. We've become comfortable doing business a certain way. What are the threats that are out there in the industry?
Complacency. I think the biggest threat is yourself. If you're not focused on your customer solutions, and you get complacent and you're just not paying attention, that's the biggest threat. As far as threats from the outside, and there's always somebody out there that can do it cheaper. And so you can't fight that battle. You have to really provide value. And I know that's a buzzword, but that's really what you have to focus on is, are you a great value to your customer, and do you have the ability to drive more customers that appreciate that value?
Yeah, it's true, because there are very little barriers to entry in our business. Anyone can get in it. I mean, to amass a certain size is a little more difficult, but I see just local competition. When you're a national company, I think it's difficult to compete in a lot of those small local markets. You have to find a creative way to be able to do that.
Right.
I think there's a place of conversation around how do we not treat our clients like the next customer at Walmart? And part of that is by managing client load and focusing on what is the right client that's the best match for what you do. I think there's another discussion that can take place around how do we not sell like we're a commodity? If you're a pound of sugar, you're just a pound of sugar, and it's a matter of which store they went to. And getting out of the commodity market would be crucial for a new business owner. Bring something of value, something that you can articulate differently than the people you're trying to compete against. If not, you're just a pound of sugar at Walmart.
So how do you articulate value to your employees and your customers?
I think you eliminate the common rhetoric that's been passed around for 25 years on contracts. I think you go to something new, something that's original, so that when they lay out four of you next to each other, yours looks different. It may be a larger packet, it may be a smaller packet, it may be more specific, it may be more generic, but you're not trying to compete toe-to-toe, head-to-head, same thing to same thing. You're thinking original thoughts, and you're communicating a process that's different from what they expected to get from you.
So how do you address the fact that if you change the way that you present a proposal, it sounds like you're talking about a proposal.
Sure.
If you change the way they do that, don't you get a negative reaction from your legacy clients, and don't your new clients question why you're doing it differently instead of doing it the way that they want it?
Anything that engages a dialogue is your friend. If you are able to enter a conversation with a client about your proposal, you are miles ahead of a client just reading it and going, I get it. The events we do today are so complicated. Content, strategy, everything else is way different than show up with 120K of par cans and shine them on the stage and put different colors in them.
I think if you wait to get a decision based on a proposal and everything's done over the phone or through the mail, your chances of getting it are pretty slim anyway, or not being commoditized. So I think you have to engage. You have to go out and you have to visit people. They have to come and visit you. You have to give them a reason to come and see you, or for them to take the time for you to go see them. So the proposal thing for us is if we just put a proposal in the mail, I'll put a slim chance of us getting that, and I'll put it in the lower margin.
Yeah, so you just dated yourself by saying putting a proposal in the mail because.
I think he meant email.
Email.
Yeah. Email. Well, you could have said fax machine. So if you fax the proposal over to the client, right?
Fax machine on thermal paper.
Yeah. Did you uncurl my proposal yet?
Yeah. So, did it have the big stripe on it?
Mike, how do you instill value in your products and services to your employees, to
employees and clients as well? I think by offering different additional but related services like content testing, content management, things that are easy to do, but they involve you at a much earlier level with your client. Mm-hmm. You're not the AV afterthought after the booth is designed or the stage is designed, content is created, and then all of a sudden they want you to horseshoe in your AV. When you're involved at the earlier stage, you're involved through the process, your chances of getting that job are much better.
Mike, Nick, and Alan have given us some great points. I love the stuff about math, communication, understanding the threats. These are very important things to face. Now, let's hear what the other group has to say, and then we'll wrap it all up.
What do you consider, I mean, we've got a lot of years of experience here, is the biggest threat to the industry or your part of the industry today? And how is that different from what it was 5 or 10 years ago? You may want to take a moment and think about that, but what's the biggest threat?
The one I see constantly is very aggressive contracts in the venues that we work in with the intention of keeping us out of there. Mm-hmm. And the giveaways by some of these companies, whether it be an internet service or some other peripheral piece, to make it a penalty for our customers to use us. Mm-hmm. We have to find ways to be creative, discount in some other areas, or just design better than them, to get the jobs out of there. Mm-hmm. But I see that as a constant threat. Whether they up the room charges if you don't use the in-house company, or put on exorbitant rigging fees by controlling that. There's a lot of those things that are in place right now with the intent purpose of keeping traveling production companies out of venues.
Understood. Mark, what do you see as the biggest threat?
I think that the world's changing, the technology is changing, the way that that people are delivering and receiving content and information is evolving, and I think that represents a threat and an opportunity. I guess the threat is that if our company or our companies in this industry are flat-footed in responding to this, and not recognizing that people are moving to a bring your own device model. They're moving from a one-to-many type presentations to many-to-many, and there's a ton of opportunity in there. But it's also cannibalizing some of the traditional ways that I think us and companies in our industry made a living.
It's a change in business model.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are you saying, Murray?
Well, I think that what I'm seeing is, and it's the same problem that is affecting a lot of industries, is there is complete transparency in pricing. Mm-hmm. If you're a car dealer, you can find out exactly what that, if you're a car buyer, you're going to find out exactly what that car will cost, and you'll go to the dealer and say, this is what I'm willing to pay. If you're an airline, it's like, I want to take a flight somewhere, I can look at 20 different airlines that are going to get me from here to there and choose the lowest price if that's what if that's what I want to do. And likewise, I think that we're seeing complete transparency in our pricing and a client base that's far more knowledgeable about how our pricing works and so on, and can exploit that and push us to be in an unprofitable area and so on. I think that the answer to that is to really build those very tight bonds with your clients.
So as expected, if you ask 6 people what's really important, you're going to get 10 different answers. So we've got some good stuff here. Let's walk through and see what we've learned. You know, Mike started out great because he spoke straight, he talked about my favorite thing in the world, which is math, went straight to the cost of goods sold as the most important thing that he thinks a new business owner or a colleague needs to know and understand. So helping employees understand pricing and expenses, understand how the numbers work and what affects profit and why profit is important to them. This is a very valuable lesson. You know, it's interesting. I find it extraordinary that in a P&L statement, I can drill down and find out what the cost of postage is at your company. But in most costs of goods sold, I can't find subrentals broken out in anything other than one number. And your subrental expenses is very diverse. You have lots of different things that you buy. So understanding cost of goods sold means that we've got to get out of that P&L mentality and look at the operational metrics to find out what's really going on. So Mike, thank you for sharing that with us. That was good stuff. You know, Nick brought up communication and goals, and I'm grateful for that as well. I worked with the communication strategy with his company some time ago, and conveying goals is extremely important. Your employees have to understand what you're trying to accomplish. And if they do, they can give you an idea of what's the thing that needs to happen next. So communication is two-way. We communicate goals so they can communicate back strategies and tactics that will help us reach that. In other words, you have to have bigger conversations with your employees besides, did you get that thing done today? We talked about threats. What are some of the threats that people are facing? And I think we can all agree there are very few barriers to entry in our industry in particular anymore. Anybody can play in this space if that's what they want to do. So, to Alan's point, there's always somebody who can do it cheaper. That doesn't mean that that is your competition. It doesn't mean that you aren't worth more money. So we have to separate that conversation about these guys are cheaper from what is it that we're providing. So his message is value proposition. What's the value proposition of your organization? If we tie that back into what Nick says, let's make that part of our communications and goals, that we're trying to convey this value proposition, and our goal is we're going to have better customers, deliver higher profit, get to enjoy the fruits of that kind of a business. And it all goes back, let's tie it all back to math and make that loop complete. Now, the second group comes in, again, more good stuff. While Nick in the first group talked about complacency in ourselves as leaders, Mark specifically cited, we need to pay attention to changing technology and what does it actually mean? So changing technology is not just about I need to buy the latest, greatest video projector or new mixing console. What are customers doing with it? What are real people doing with it? BYOD, bring your own device, has changed the way that we do presentations. And it's certainly affected the systems integration industry and how they're having to put permanent installations in, but it's really affecting how we're doing work on stage. And we have presenters that want to present from their iPad. We have to be able to say yes. We have to understand how it works and how it can work well. We can tell you all the reasons why it won't work as well as we would like it to. Does it work as well as the customer would like it to? Stick to the changing technology, understand what it's providing for the end customer so that we can adapt it to our needs. Rusty brought up this issue of venue exclusivity, and to me this is a complacency issue because if you're fighting with companies or with venues that have companies dedicated to a particular line of business and they're not letting you do business there, don't be complacent. Okay? The solution has always been on the venue issue and the venue contract issue, how do we better educate our clients about how to sign contracts with hotels and convention centers so that they can bring in their supplier of choice? We're not always going to win, but we do have an obligation to help our clients understand how to navigate these waters. So it's always going to be an issue. It's probably going to continue to get a little bit worse before it gets better because it is kind of cyclical, but don't be a bystander. Figure out what it is that you can do to help your clients navigate. And then the last topic that comes up is about creating value. And we've talked about creating value in a couple of the other videos that you need to watch, including the content production and the pricing value, and even in the budgets and CapEx video. Many, many times we're going to come back to how do we create value in our organizations and sell that to our customers. Adding services that help you get involved earlier is a really important thing to do. And it's vital for us to remain relevant in our industry going forward. There's really not a lot of room and a lot of need for companies that just rent equipment and send a technician out with it anymore, or just install a video projector or a flat screen in a boardroom. There's not a lot of value added in this world, and it's only going to become more commoditized. So have conversations with your clients about important things, which means that you need to be able to provide important services for them. So our takeaways on what's really important. Well, first of all, foster better conversations in your company. Figure out how to get people together and have a two-way conversation with your employees. Focus on actionable items. An action item is something that has a defined deliverable, a clear owner of the project, and a deadline. Okay? If you think that there's something important you need to do, make it actionable, and maybe it will happen. And redirect your energy towards solutions. We spent an awful lot of time focusing on problems. Here are 6 owners that shared what's important in business and what they think is important for you to understand. None of these were problems. These were all about solutions. I think we need to respect them for that, thank them for that, and embrace it. So don't forget to share this with your employees because they can contribute to the conversation as well. So have fun with it, and thanks for watching.